This is the PowerApps podcast from CRM Audio, what you need to know about Microsoft PowerApps and Flow. This episode is brought to you by KingswaySoft. KingswaySoft is a leading integration solution provider offering software solutions that make data integrations affordable and painlessly easy. Thousands of enterprise clients from over 80 countries and regions use KingswaySoft to integrate data with various business systems in order to drive their business efficiency and fully leverage their information assets. And KingswaySoft now works with CDS and PowerApps. Check out their website at KingswaySoft.com. We thank KingswaySoft for sponsoring the PowerApps podcast from CRM Audio.
Welcome to another episode of the PowerApps podcast. This is the podcast on the CRM Audio Network where we talk everything PowerApps, Flow, and all of the technologies that are related. Essentially, this is the Power Platform podcast. But, you know, we already named it, so it's PowerApps podcast. And as always, with me are my co-hosts, those Dynamics guys, Chris Huntingford, Kyle Hill, and Will Dorrington. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
You know, I'm all right.
That's
I'm
good.
all right.
Yeah. Not excited with all the release notes that have come out? Come on, Shawn.
Well, let me. We got the release notes. We got the release notes last week, and they total, I believe, 238 pages.
Carl's read them all.
Well,
it was a long plane journey back.
Well, that it was.
You read them all
It wasn't as long as yours, but 6 hours is long for me. But yeah, there was a lot to read. There's a lot to understand, especially for us. We have projects in flight. How are these things going to be impacted? What do we need to be looking out for our customers? But specifically for PowerApps, there is so much because of essentially, like I said, the Power Platform that they announced at Business Application Summit. It is all-encompassing now. There's a reason why we have that PowerApps logo in a model-driven app. So today, we're going to cover PowerApps and Flow related features of the release notes, and on other shows on the network, like for example, At Your Service, we'll cover customer service, field service, and project service related release notes. And on CRM Audio, we'll cover some of the sales and other features. So let's get to it, boys. Let's start out. What is your favorite thing they released? And it doesn't necessarily have to be PowerApps, but if you want it to be PowerApps, that's cool too. So let's start. I'm going to throw this out to. I'm going to go to Chris first. What's your favorite? What's your favorite thing in the release notes, Chris?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shawn.
For those at home, this is how you detect who actually read it.
Actually, so this is quite funny because Chris and I had this conversation earlier, and he said to me one of his favourite parts was the new formatting of formulas, wasn't it, Chris? You were saying the ability to make them easier to read and understand was something you're really interested in, and you think it's going to help you build Canvas apps with a lot more proficiency.
He told me that he can relate to it from his code writing days, and it just simplifies things, and he can put some complexity into the formulas.
Chris?
Yeah,
that's exactly what.
And because Chris told me in a different conversation that he was really trying to hone in on a certain formula, and it was quite a sticky badger. So I'm glad to see that they released this for you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, guys. It was great. Learned a lot about it. Great notes.
But you said much more than that, Chris, didn't you? You said a lot more than that, I believe, especially after the hackathon. Your creative juices were flowing. And what else was it that you said? Something about the new themes?
Yeah, you presented it. That same thing you presented at the hackathon. Just go on. Give it again.
Themes. They were awesome.
What about the lookups? You something you said lots about that.
Yeah, lookups work really well.
Because you know how the lookup fields are really one to many many to one relationships. So
genuinely, those are cool. They actually are very cool. Okay.
So
I think something that's really important here is the fact that, number one, not a lot of people know that you can actually get the lookups working without too much of a hassle. And I actually did write a little blog post about it. I might write one on complex formulas and themes at one day, but I know that Will's going to be explaining how that all works in the next 8 minutes or so. But
it's always better coming from you, mate.
No, I can't do it, man. You sound way better than I do. But essentially, when you're linking up, so the way that I found it working quite well is that when you're linking up, you pop a form onto one of the screens, you give that form essentially a data source, you pick all your fields, and one of them's a lookup, right? And you either used to the lookup showing GUIDs, like a ton of GUIDs, or nothing at all inside the lookup. It's actually quite simple. So all you need to do is make sure that you stay on the form itself, click directly into the field, and then you've got to click again directly into the data card. And what that'll actually do is give you the option on the right-hand side to select what field part of that table shows directly in the lookup. So it works pretty well. So you remove the concept of having the GUID stuck in there, and you can actually see the real text. So the example is full name on a contact. If you drill into that card, you basically remove contact ID, you change it to full name, and voila, magic, there you go. Right, and that's about all I have to contribute for lookups.
So,
but
Velvet Voice
supposedly now it's going to be easier, right?
Yeah. So essentially, and I think it's going to make everyone else's life a whole lot easier, because at the moment, a lot of people, that's probably the most contentious point in what.
It's the sticky badger.
Yeah, this is a proper sticky badger. Came up in the hackathon many times, and essentially, it was really about how do I get this right? How do I get it to work? And it's something that we were really hoping Microsoft was going to release, and they have. So, kaboom! Sticky badger problem solved.
And another great thing that's actually popped up in the notes was the ability to configure dependent option sets. So, say you had a drop down of let's say cats and dogs. I'm that creative today, and then you can have another drop down set that actually filters from that. I mean, it's kind of easy to do with formulas already, but this will make it so much more low code, low formula. And I think that's going to be really handy. So you filter to cat or dog, and then it will give you a list of cats or dogs automatically without having to pick and choose. Thought I'd put that out there.
that sounds like it does solve a sticky badger type problem, which is very important.
So, I mean, from my side, one of the most exciting things is being able to embed a Canvas app in a model-driven app. And this is something that we touched about at the BizApp Summit as well. There's a whole PowerApps control framework that's now sitting behind the Business Apps platform. And this is going to enable us to put a whole lot of controls that can render in either a Canvas app or a model-driven app, but could also render a Canvas app in a model-driven app. So the flexibility is really going cross-platform now. So you can get Will's amazing animation games and Hangman and such to now be embedded as part of your model-driven app. And pro tip there, you can actually get paid during your day job to play games.
That's actually interesting. I've got a random question for you guys. So, when we were building stuff out recently, I was struggling to embed a standard Power BI dashboard in a model-driven app. Right, so am I going crazy? Did I miss something there? No comments.
What about the ability to do it, or?
Yeah, in a so within the unified client interface, like, have you managed to embed an actual dashboard? An actual Power BI, a Power BI tile inside one of the dashboards?
That's part of the release notes as well, actually, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, because somebody said something interesting to me, actually, at the hackathon. They're like, well, you can embed Power BI in a Canvas app. Why don't you just embed the Canvas app inside the model-driven app?
Well, yeah, and so what we heard at the summit was to do just that. You embed the Canvas app in the model-driven app, and then you have the Power BI tile in the Canvas app, and that's how you expose the Power BI tile.
Exactly, and that's something that came up the other day.
So, Chris, there are some changes as well where you'll be able to embed a Power BI tile directly on a model-driven app form as well.
Carl, you're just ruining my moments.
And the reason why is so that it can actually be contextual. That tile can be contextual to the model-driven app's context, the record that it's on. So what's nice about that is you've got two different ways to skin that cat.
Or badger, as they say.
Or badger, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then here's another question. So in the context of embedding Canvas apps inside model-driven apps, another discussion I had was around dialogs. And is this not like a cooler way to do a dialogue, really? So saying, yeah, you got your model-driven app, but you can embed the Canvas app to cater for the dialogue processes.
Yeah, actually in the Flow roadmap and vision session at Summit, they a matter of fact kind of stated that Canvas apps was the way forward for dialogues. They're not using the statement of it that they're being pulled out of the interface, but the thought is that that's how, if you want dialogues, Canvas apps embedded in Dynamics or in a model-driven app is the way you would achieve that functionality. And I think for the better, you're going to get even more capabilities and functionality in a Canvas-driven app than you would in a dialogue.
Absolutely, and I really think that's going to be driving user adoption, which is massive. So that's very cool.
So the alternative to that as well is you're going to be able to embed custom controls in business process flows. So a typical model-driven approach to things, you'll be able to take those custom controls, which could be just an element of a Power App or something completely custom, and put that in to achieve the process rather than worrying whether which side of the technology it sits in.
And actually, what's interesting about being able to embed a Canvas app inside a model app is something and sorry to relate back to the hackathon again, but someone actually used an iframe to expose the Canvas app within the model app. And I thought that was genius that they did that. Very clever.
Well, it opens up so much potential for user experience by doing that, because you could then pull, based on attributes on a given form, your Canvas app could be looking at something completely different that's related, where you would need some kind of JavaScript or maybe even a plugin to be able to have that work, in historical classic Dynamics, right? And now with Canvas apps, you give a lot more no-code capabilities and functions with that. So I think it's fantastic.
And the other thing that they've pushed out, and I think it can easily be overlooked, the importance of this, but that is friendly labels. So when you're actually pulling in a data source, maybe from CDS or SharePoint, they actually have two labels so two names for every table and field. There's always a development one, which can be a bit sort of percentage signs, etc. And and to those who are functional, that can look entirely alien to us, like some secret language that only they know. And then there's actually one that's unique and it's easy to read. Then they only historically surfaced the former, but they're now actually pushing out the latter as well, which, it's very small, but it's going to make a massive difference.
I agree. Anytime you can get friendly labels, friendly names, you're minimizing the gap in between the lesser technical folks and giving them some ability to work within the Power App. So that's very cool. Something that piqued my interest in it's kind of a minor function, but I think it's for user experience. It's really important. The rich text editor and the HTML view controls that gives a lot of style and function within your Canvas app that you haven't had before. Rich text editor is something that almost every implementation I get asked for because they're used to it in whatever solution they were in before. So seeing this piqued my interest.
Shawn, I thought you were going to say something around ALM or application lifecycle management. One of your gripes from previously has been resolved, and now being able to include these Power Apps and solutions and flows in those solutions as well, and easily transport them between solutions. Is that going to be useful for you?
It's huge. For me, yes, it's huge because being able to, right now, that's one of the gaps that I have with my customers in embracing Canvas apps, because of the different deployment method that you have to undertake, the different admin method that you have to undertake, and who has rights and abilities to do that. So they don't want to go to two different places to be able to manage that capability. And by being able to contain flows, connectors, and Canvas apps within a solution and have that portability. We still haven't heard the whole story on what it exactly means for whether or not we have to republish every 6 months, like we previously heard, and what other limitations there may be. But I like the fact that we're moving forward in that ALM story. And what's important is what we're hearing here is two things. It could mean two things to two different sets of people. So for CE, historically CE customer engagement folks, ALM to Power Apps means what we've been talking about: adding custom connectors, adding flows, adding Canvas apps to a solution that we're familiar with, and being able to port from environment to environment. For other folks that are relatively new to Dynamics, ALM and solutions mean something totally different because they don't necessarily have that concept in full. So some of what we've been doing for years now is something relatively new. I actually went to a session at Summit, at Business Application Summit, that was ALM for Power Apps, and it was essentially Dynamics CE solutions.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I was like, well, but yeah, I think this is brilliant. I'm very excited about this capability, and I'm hoping that it really allows us to make sure that all our environments are at parity. It allows us to understand dependencies and do those checks like we do now, and make that deployment method such an easier process instead of having to create multiple copies of the Power App to fake a dev test and prod.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Shawn. I mean, when they state that it's going to be easy to find and work with solutions from Power Apps, the thing that I found really interesting was when you open up the Solution Explorer essentially in Power Apps, and you kind of expect it to open through to another Power Apps page, and then you get CE in front of you. I think some people found it a bit off-putting. I don't know why, but it's the old classic view of how it all works and fits together, and the fact that they're moving it directly into Power Apps is really awesome. So I think that's big for us, big time. It kind of moves away from this whole concept of it's completely CE reliant, and kind of pushes it more towards it's Power Platform.
Right, and as folks engaged in customer engagement for so long, we just have a little bit more knowledge in the short term that we can help that community, those community folks that don't.
Oh, absolutely. We found a lot of people when we've done events. We found a lot of people, they kind of start doing config, and this is also really important. They'll start doing things like config in CDS inside the actual Power Apps view, but then move off into Dynamics, the old the old classic view, and you kind of want to push people away from doing that. So it's all around how things are perceived, and I think it is important.
Well, with the features for the responsive layout and the ability to choose the size of your app, how I can see the value in the responsive layout, definitely, right off the bat. But in terms of being able to choose the size, other than the standard dimensions for displays that we've seen before, how are you seeing this as a new feature coming in the next release?
See, that's quite a hard question, because I had the same thought on it. I mean, because one really achieves the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, why would you want to choose the height and the width if it's going to be responsive anyway? I guess the only thing I can think of really for that is if so say you're in a restaurant or a chain of restaurants, for example, and you know that they always use the same size tablet. I guess it could be less code, it could be less heavy on it. I'm really unsure, to be honest. I mean, can you see any ways or?
The thing that popped up to me was something I did years ago for financial services. We created a .NET app that was for note entry, right? Yeah. And it was built with a very small window because it was meant to only take up a certain amount of real estate on the screen. That was really the only kind of thing when I'm thinking choose your size. If you get down to how big it is, if you wanted, when you invoke it from the player, that you only want it to take a certain amount of screen real estate because it's a widget, on a desktop, or a widget in an app.
That's a really good point, actually. Because say you want to actually have a couple of apps running side by side,
Right.
if they're both responsive, then it's not going to happen. No. That's a very good point.
Right. So that'll be interesting to see.
And you touched on quickly there the themes as well, briefly, which is the let's start running through the some more of the document. I can see that they've finally released more out of the box themes you can choose from, and what's really good here is that they've actually aligned it with the SharePoint themes. So if you do embed your Power App into SharePoint, you can actually have it match the same theme as your SharePoint site itself, making more of a blended, natural look. God, I sounded a bit like a hairdresser then, didn't I?
And Will, one of the other things you've been skirting around quite nicely is some of the new functionality in Flow, and in particular, where users can use their location as a connector. So one of the first apps that you built and you were investigating was all around location. Your Stalker app, as you then spoke about.
Whoa! We weren't going to speak about that. There's a whole thing going on. Just put that back in the box.
But interesting to see that Microsoft adopted that idea, and now basically geofencing. So your flows are going to be triggered based on the location of the device, running through Power Apps, and could be really, really useful for health and safety scenarios, checking into work sites, those sorts of scenarios.
Stalking, yeah, it's all good. And I also like the fact that they're giving you a simplified gallery. So as you know, I love building Power Apps, especially Canvas apps, and I do it quite a lot most evenings, and that's how sad I am. And one of the things that does get a little bit laborious after a while is if you select a gallery or a form or either a data table, whatever it may be, when you go through and you have to keep selecting all the different fields you want. And some of them are, quite standard fields. And you start thinking, actually, why aren't these pre-selected? Well, now they're starting to do that. For when you're putting something from Dynamics that they feel is like a common area, like purchase orders or invoice, etc., they will pre-select certain lines for you. I mean, of course, the downside of that is sometimes they pre-select lines you really don't care about, so you have to unselect and then go and find the ones you wanted in the first place.
But at least having the ability to get a chance that they're going to select the right one for you, that's better than none at all.
Yes, and they're finally bringing out a filter, I believe, which I used to have to use the Control F function. So if anyone doesn't know this little trick, if you are, when you're looking for a particular value within a data source, you can actually use Control F, and if you type that in, it will take you to the correct label you're looking for or the correct value you're looking for. But now they're actually going to bring in a filter, which is great.
Kyle, have you seen much of the designing flows in Visio functionality? I saw a little bit of that at Business Application Summit and was blown away.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a huge amount of it, but what it really helps you to do is take, sort of your typical BA, your analysts' scenarios about achieving outcomes and overlay flow on it, or create a flow sort of simultaneously through Visio. So it's breaking down those silos again. You're not having to repeat work where you document out this whole process and then you have to go and build it somewhere else and specify it. It all just gets consolidated into one, and it's not only in Visio. I mean, a great example is being able to execute flows from Excel as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you need to go and send data to a specific system that may not be CDS or Dynamics 365 or something like that, you can just run a flow from Excel. Not that I'm promoting Excel, but the PowerApps platform, the Business Applications platform, supports that now, and I think it'll go right the way through. There's been some changes in Outlook and the Outlook apps for Dynamics as well on the same sort of scenario, where just leveraging all of that power in the platform and being able to achieve these scenarios with all of their different connectors and flow elements.
The deeper integration to Office 365, I think, is hugely important, though, because to your point, they're drilling into those applications that users use every single day, and getting a different value proposition for non-power users to leverage the platform and to engage in the input of data. Quite often in verticals like financial services, or in manufacturing, you have folks that like to work in Excel, and that's all they want to do. They don't want to go in. They don't want to launch Dynamics 365 to open a contact record or open an account record, right? So by giving them the ability to work in Excel and have flows to be able to trigger to have actionable results and notify other folks and have it integrated into the entire system is massive. And the Visio capability for Flow, where you actually have Visio shapes that translate into Flow actions when you put them on the form. I mean, I love Visio.
Powerful.
I use Visio all the time. Having something like that to where you can go from a business process flow, describing it to your client, right directly into the flow itself, that I think it makes it so much more seamless in that translation.
I think it's also a game of numbers, though. So if you look at your typical Office 365 users, there's about 200 million of them that are active every month. That's what Microsoft tells us. So by enabling them with these small subsets of BizApps and PowerApps functionality, you're automatically including them as part of the community. So you're going to get scenarios where you're going to be able to achieve these things, like you said, Shawn, not having to open a contact record, but just submitting or running some sort of flow straight out of Outlook or Excel or Visio, and achieving that same output. The benefit is just the efficiency, and that's across the entire organization, where everybody, 200 million plus people could be making use of this.
Work in the area where you're most comfortable and where it's most relevant, and that's what Flow does. It kind of covers all of them, which is absolutely fantastic. I remember seeing a very old tool back in the day when it was CRM 2011. I can't, for the life of me, remember what it was, but the concept was that it could work across Dynamics and SharePoint, and this was before Flow and everything. And now that this is, and that was revolutionary, and now that this is absolutely possible, I think it's really pushing users to get more involved, and like you said, get more involved in the Microsoft product stack and work where they feel more comfortable, and they can still engage in the process. And I absolutely love that. The Visio thing is also absolutely fantastic because again, it's promoting somebody that like a BA, somebody that understands how to build out business processes and understands how business processes work. I mean, not just saying it, they only understand it, but they're used to working in Visio, and I use Visio every day. So for me, I think this is a fantastic upgrade and a fantastic change.
And you're starting to see especially in the release notes, you're seeing the precursors for the evolution of Flow, becoming more and more of that standard workflow foundation, right?
Spot on,
With Dynamics workflows and processes slowly becoming flowified, I guess you could say. For example, the first one is
that.
Yeah, that's
there you go.
flowified is now a thing.
Business process flows in Dynamics are now part of Microsoft Flow, and doing cool things like adding the custom controls to business process flows. That is huge for a user experience standpoint. But the fact that now for the model-driven apps, you can control a business process flow using flow-based capability, I think that's, again, it's another win.
Yeah, absolutely. I just from where this product was, product set was 5 years ago to where it is now, and what's been made available is absolutely unbelievable. And I think it does promote more low code, no code, but again, you still got the ability for the developers to get stuck in and really, really enhance the product stack. So yeah, it suits me fine. I'm a functional guy.
And something else that you're seeing a lot in these release notes, on various things throughout the document, you'll see release notes like the item you were just talking about, Kyle, with location as a connector. It was generated by an idea from the ideas site. And throughout the document, you can see as covered by this idea, and there's a hyperlink, flow button enhancements. As covered by this idea, users will be able to pass richer data to button flows. So they're really listening to the community. They're really listening to valuable input put in through that ideas site, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think you can see that sort of across Microsoft as well. At the beginning of the release notes, they give you some email addresses where you can get in contact with them about anything in the release notes. There's obviously the ideas site so that you can contribute the ideas and upvote them directly. And even further, the docs.microsoft.com site is now sort of open sourced, very like Wikipedia. So if knowledge or scenarios are missing from there, you can go and contribute them in, and that's to the betterment of the whole society. So I know people like Will are putting together a sort of PowerApps Bible, if you will, a whole lot of knowledge. Want to get that out there, you can put it on the docs.microsoft side. You can find where the gaps are and suggest ideas that Microsoft actually do listen to you and actually credit you in the release notes for your idea and deliver the feature and function mostly as you requested it.
That was well worded.
Yes, mostly.
Mostly as you requested it. And knowing Will and some of his tendencies, I don't think all the features should go through to production. But
Super Mario gamification, they ignored that.
Yeah, but Will, they also ignored your request to dye every theme marshmallow pink. So
yeah, but I can do that on my own. So
And Shawn, I think it was a theme from the BizApp Summit as well, is that a lot of the engineering team were there and saying, listen, community, you tell us things, we'll evaluate it, and if there's enough ask for it, we're absolutely going to include it in and make this platform more usable by more people.
I mean, it makes so much sense because our entire community is full of absolute geniuses, so why not listen to them and why not take on what they have to say?
Well, they're definitely more open than they've ever been before. In historic conferences, you would get that, oh, okay, that kind of response when you tell them something.
Can you just say it one more time, Shawn?
Shawn gets that response a lot.
Okay. Yeah. It's like when my daughter says that she tells me something about her day and I'm not really listening, and I say, oh, okay, yeah, great. It's that kind of thing that you used to get, but now it's like, tell me more about that. Let's dig deeper into that. And they're really taking the time to understand the need and the ask. And they're also looking at, do you have existing customers that have this problem or struggle? Is this an IP question? Is it stopping you from extending the platform? Getting those kind of questions, which quite honestly, the first time I got them, I'm like, okay, I was not thinking you were going to say that. So hold on, let me think for a second. Yes. But yeah, there's just a ton of capabilities and functionality here, just in the PowerApps and Flow section alone, that we could probably talk for a couple hours on it. But we are getting close to time. So what would you say, for those listening, what would you say would be the areas that you would advise them to focus on the most? If they're in a public preview before the release is out, if they have the ability to take a look at this capabilities, or once the functionality is released, what would you say for them to really focus on?
I'll go first because I think the whole ALM, the solution management, I think that's going to be absolutely key. It's going to help distribute these apps between environments and between customers. And the PowerApps Bank is sort of the precursor to that, so we'll be able to have solutions up there and spread the knowledge really quickly. Obviously, that's good for organizations, but it's good for the community as well.
Yeah, good point.
What about you, Will?
I mean, I'd have to echo what Carl's just stated, really. Along with the enhanced sharing of apps that I'm not sure we mentioned yet, it kind of goes hand in hand with that ALM approach where, hey, here's one way you can actually package up a solution and send that out, but here's how you can share it just generally within your organization. So I think those two are very interesting, and I know a lot of people have become unstuck with this import-export, but with this, I think we will probably be able to get around that.
Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, the solution piece for me is probably the biggest, but I'm really interested to see how Flow is going to work with Visio. Like that's really stood out for me. I mean, I think obviously from a more technical point of view, it's really worth focusing on the solution side of things, and I'd love to understand how they can be made more portable. But using Flow and Visio, I'm dead keen on that. I think that's going to be something that's going to change the way that people work massively.
One thing that it's not exactly a PowerApps release notes piece, but it's related, that I'm really looking forward to diving into more, is there's going to be a sample app for unified resource scheduling.
Ooh.
There's a sample Power App that they're building to help you understand how you can tie into URS through PowerApps. That's I think
insane.
Is gigantic for those small businesses or just large companies that want to extend in a Power App the ability to schedule resources or equipment or people, and some of the capabilities that they're extending with URS. That to me is a big win. In addition to the solution management and such.
Yeah, I can share a little treat around that. I mean, URS at its core is basically calling a CRM action, for those of you that are familiar with that. So what they're doing, and because this, it's a unified platform now, with the Common Data Service or CDS, you're just going to be able to surface those actions through PowerApps. And don't be surprised to see that Flow will be able to call those same actions. And we see in some of the other areas, you said URS, but service scheduling, there's a whole lot more in the release notes about that. But it really does promote a great deal of scheduling capability. That's why we all love Outlook, because you can schedule meetings and all the rest of that. But now it's going to open up that scenario to a more business-focused context. So watch this space. It'll be a huge feature. Good call out.
It's going to be an exciting few months, and from what I understand, they're going to talk about it. Actually, I think Charles mentioned it on the last episode that at Ignite. Is it Ignite?
It's Ignite.
Is the next one? All right, I get confused by Inspire and
Orlando.
Ignite. Yes, the one I'm going to at Ignite. There's going to be even a heavier focus than at BizApp Summit for PowerApps, Flow, and the platform. So I can't wait to dive in and check that out. But yeah, I encourage everybody listening to really dive into the release notes. I'm sure you'll be seeing from our team blog posts and tweets and references and lots more information on how to dive deeper and get the most out of these release notes. And I would keep an eye on them. I don't think this is a static document. You'll probably see things added and possibly some things clipped as we get closer. But keep an eye out for that. And I think that does it, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want one final note. Something that's very important is to actually read the release notes. That's what I found.
Chris, the features are targeted for October, so you've got some time. We know you're a slow reader.
You know what it is, man. I'm just so busy on actually doing billable work, Carl.
Okay.
Whatever your excuse is, it's fine. We'll read it to you.
Thanks, man. If you could use your silky tones to read it to me.
Read them to your kids each night. Pro tip.
That's right. Turn it into a story.
Have you guys ever met my kids? They were caught earlier eating an entire bowl of Cocoa Pops on the floor. So reading the release notes means
you were sitting with them doing the same, right?
It's not,
Splitting image of their father.
Don't ruin a good story with facts, Will.
All right, gents. Well, I think that does it for another episode of the PowerApps podcast. We'll be back in, I believe, 2 weeks' time for another scintillating story. But until then, read those release notes and give us some feedback. And if there's anything you want to have us talk about or cover, give us a tweet. We'll put the links to each of our Twitter handles in the show notes. But well done, boys. I think we're done.
I think I contributed the most. Thanks,
all right, boys.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
See you later. Bye-bye.
This has been the PowerApps podcast from CRM Audio. Send us your feedback at mail at PowerAppsPodcast.com. Check out other episodes from the CRM Audio Network by going to CRM Audio in your browser or searching for CRM Audio on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, any place else that you can find podcasts. This is a production of Dynamics Podcast LLC.